All right, so I've never really done this before, but I've been into myths lately, and one of the interesting things about them is the flood myths. Tablet 11 talks about Gilgamesh has a very similar flood myth to one I grew up with, which is the story of Noah. So it's talking about the boat being built, launching the boat, making sure you have all the living beings on it. There's a big storm, and then there's this flood, which lasts uh, for a long time. And then afterwards, the boat, which I was reading someone on YouTube reciting the myth, and I'm just listening along. And they say the boat lodged firmly on Mount Nimush. And I was like, huh, I wonder where that is. So I then went down this track of looking up what Mount Nimush was. Well, it's a mountain supposedly um, just north of this city in Iraq, which is in what would have been Mesopotamia. So it's these mountains up here, and they're actually some of the tallest mountains in the area. And so that's what we're going to get into because there's something at the end of this I think is really freaking interesting. So as you can see, people come up here, take pictures because you're pretty high up on this plateau. I'm not sure this is the highest point of the plateau, um, but let me show you some of the highest points. So that's down one ridge. So again, you've kind of got this flat Mesopotamian valley and then this huge ridge line that sticks up off the crest. And the sunset and sunrise play a big point in this. Um, Ignore the actual photo locations for now. But if you look, again, there's this big ridge kind of along another ridge line that is some of the highest points around the area. So if there was a flood that covered that much of the land, this would be realistically a point that people would land on. Now, that'll be the last time I show that map view. Again, bear with me because this is kind of new for me. Um, so if we hop up here and start giving context, again, you can see the surrounding area. Go to a different area. And this is what I'm calling the normal valley. So yeah, it's pretty high up. And then because it's like a rocky area, there's lots of debris, and these debris fields kind of fill up with stones. Well, as I'm looking around, looking at photos, thinking, man, wouldn't that be cool to see like some old school uh, altar or thing calling attention to maybe this old mountain? I start seeing these like weird rock fields that have kind of this weird shape, as in, huh, that's a lot of rocks with not a lot growing in it. And if this has been here for that long, it's kind of unusual that they wouldn't have settled a bit more than that. Maybe earthquakes uh, brought these things and settled them down. But again, as I'm looking, um, the shape I see, I'm like, huh, that's the weirdest thing ever. And what's kind of fun with it is it's in line with the sunset, sort of. And you'll see in a second another shape over here. But that's the first call out is, huh, there's kind of this funky rock field, and then like, what's happening here that it's not going down there, or um, it's kind of interesting. So that's the first one to call attention to. And again, it's on top of the world, so really a beautiful spot in Iraq. One of the issues with this, by the way, is there's not a lot of photos. I mean, shout out to Aram and all the guys who took pictures around here. This is standing in the middle of one of those rock fields. So again, kind of a cool spot, regardless of if it does or doesn't have significance. I'm just working through these pictures now. Then I start seeing like, huh, there's another rock field. So that's the one we were just looking at over here. And this is kind of this valley at the top between the two. And here's this other one. And then I was like, wow, that's an interesting, kind of cool. There's just a circle growing. And if you look close, there's actually another divot right here. You can see it on other photos. And of course, the whole time I'm looking at stones like, all right, let's see what they've got going on here. Just natural cracks. Okay, interesting, cool. No marks or anything. But the cool thing's coming, I promise. Again, a little more context of the valley. giant rock pit right in the center. Again, my eyes are peeled. I'm like, what's this little round thing? I think it's just a shadow. Um, but what's interesting, this is a valley between the ridges that points east and west. Um, Again, ignore where these photos are because they're not really mapped out to the actual geolocation. And if you look at the actual map, like the Earth map, the resolution is terrible, and um, shadows cover a lot of it. Also, it's all kind of the same color, so it's hard to tell these spots from the spring. So again, you've got this really impressive ridge line, which I think is, one, just beautiful, and this potential historical significance. Keeping it going. At this point, I'm like, these are some really cool rock fields. Like, wouldn't that be cool if they meant something? Because at the time, I'm reading of myths, and everyone's got some kind of serpent in like this founding of their thing. And it's kind of this two-headed snake. So from Mesoamerica to China with the, they call it a bit more of a dragon. It's this feathered serpent thing that has to do with time and the waters and society. So now this is looking down, and this is that ridge line, again, slightly different angle, where we're looking at that first rock field and then this other one. And really interesting to note, by the way, that these two rock fields, they're so solid with debris, I'll call it, or small boulders, has right in between it this little saddle. It's kind of like a flat plane. So again, if this is really old, it's interesting to me that these things would be so different. And so I'm starting to think like, all right, how does this happen? Maybe it's like literally a well of these rocks and dirt can't get to this height. But as I mentioned earlier, you can kind of see the two eyeballs, as I've called them, on what looks like to me, at this point I'm wishing, this snake's head between the ravines. And at this point I'm thinking, wow, how cool would it be if people generations after Gilgamesh or Noah or whoever was this person on top of this mountain, if this was the one, built some kind of thing in the form of rocks that at the equinox or something, when the sun is setting due west or rising due west, they do a party all day here on this plain or up here on this awesome plateau. You can see people have already put little stones up. So yeah, I'm like, man, wouldn't that be sweet? Now, I'm an armchair Google Earth explorer, but this is the top of the world at one of the most historical sites in the planet. Keep a note on this cabin. So we might, if you were to come here and go on Google Earth and explore the same spot, you'll see that cabin again. That's because I think there's kind of like a north-south thing where you can see some dots. So I don't know if that plays into it. Anyways, again, these are these views of the fields. There's one head, there's the other, kind of facing each other. All right, I swear we're getting to the good part. Now, this on its own, not that impressive. But why I started looking at these more, and I haven't talked about this yet, is the Slab of Gilgamesh, is what I'm calling it, because it's just a badass name. I see this picture, I'm like, oh, interesting. Really steep drop-offs, cool. Again, look at this huge mountain in the middle of this plain. Let's zoom in there. See if we can find some more shots of this. And then I go, what the heck is this? In the middle of this rock field, almost like a cork propping it up, is this shape. I call it a slab because I think it's rock. It looks nothing like the rocks in the surrounding area. I don't think it's a glacier because this is probably the springtime and it looks like there's no other glaciers around here. And so at this point, I'm like, what the heck is that? So that's actually one of the first things I saw when I was poking around in these Google Earth images. What is that slab? Thankfully, someone has a photo of it. So before I zoom in, I'm just going to give you the context. It's just in the middle of this valley. Someone's got a tent up here on the right. So for scale, this is a tent. And then here is this giant, maybe it's mud. I don't know what, but it looks like stone of some sort. A continuous slab that is actually like contoured really well to the surrounding, which is why at first I was like, is this compact ice, snow? It kind of looks like a glacier that's a little muddy. Maybe, but the sun's shining on it and I don't see any moisture. No real reflectivity. Um, and what's unique about it is that it seems to be kind of holding back all this stone. So at this point, my brain's spinning like, wow, wouldn't that be cool if this was actually like almost like a tombstone or something to hold back these stones where they buried something really neat under it. Maybe it's Noah or Gilgamesh himself. Because again, this is the rock field up here, and then there's just the slightest look at the top of the slab up here, where there's almost like a waterfall, not a waterfall, but a steep drop off. That all these stones, again, I'm like, how have these not slid down over the years? That's that thing at the base of them that's kind of holding them up, or like at a specific angle. Again, I'm not sure how deep it goes, um, but this I'm kind of calling the slab of Gilgamesh. I don't have any photos of this aside from the ones you've seen so far. I just think it's so freaking cool. Um, so yeah, maybe it's not snakes. This, and also, if we were going off a map, I think this is kind of the location of it, but this is, I don't know. The photos and where things are in reality don't totally line up. And again, you can't see any of these things from this map view. Part of it's, I think, the shadow. Um, Part of it's like the fact that there's green, and this would look different over time. But if we're aligning this north, south, east, west, um, let's see if I can get this to line up. Um, at the time, this would have been, I think the polar north would have been maybe different. Maybe the sunset would have been at a slightly different time. But where these things meet kind of follow this ridgeline overall, of kind of an east to west that I think has more to do with where the sun sets than the current compass here. So, anyways, that's my random theory. But if you're looking up this place, search for Jabal Bara Magrun, and then the rock slab pictures are somewhere in this area. So I'll show that one last time. Kind of stoke some curiosity. So yeah, what the heck is this thing? Why is there a rock field shaped like that? Is there significance? Does it have something to do with this original Gilgamesh flood myth? Love your comments. Would love to see what you guys think.